Excellent. Welcome, everybody. My name is Jason Lindstrom, and today we're going to be talking about how to retain the right people. This is the third Culture Builders Bootcamp, and we're going to be giving the attendees just about another 30 seconds to get dialed in, and then we're going to be kicking things off. So I can see a ton of people dialing in. Welcome, everybody. That's great to see. So with this Culture Building Bootcamp, we've had over 200 people registered from all over North America, all over the world, actually, which is pretty darn cool. And to get things started, I'm going to be introducing the hosts. My name is Jason Lindstrom. I'm one of the managing partners here over at Bucket List Rewards. And with us today is also Reese Green, who's the co-founder at Trailblaze Partners. And I'm very excited to have Z join us. She's the director of finance from Great Bear Resources. She's the newest co-host. So Z, welcome to the panel.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
Awesome. And as people are dialing in, I'm going to launch our first poll. We have a good question for you guys. Give me just a second here. So I'm going to put this up on screen. So what is the most common reason people leave your organization? So hopefully everybody should now see that. Go ahead and give that a click. Feel free to choose whatever answer is best for you. I'll give that just a couple more seconds. Good voting, lots of lots of activity. I'm gonna wrap up the poll and I'll just share the results. So it turns out the number one reason why most people leave is a better career opportunity elsewhere, followed by it wasn't what they expected, and then you can see there's a tie between compensation and didn't get along with manager. And that's great context for today's session. And I'd love to move on and speak to the agenda. So we're going to give a quick recap on mission, and just like last time, spend the majority of time on the conversation. We'll wrap it up with some Q&A and some special bonuses. And to speak to the mission, as always, we're on a mission to really connect people, in this case, people leaders, to help you guys build the best cultures possible. And we're always all about bringing great people together to help with that learning process. And next, I'd love to introduce our speaker for the day, Sasha Williams. I'm particularly excited to introduce Sasha. He's my personal mentor, and he's been helping me grow my business for the past, 2.5 years. And connected to today's session, in the advisory meetings, which we roughly do monthly, I call them the K-Man meetings, which means keeping me up at night. And something Sasha has been amazing at doing is helping me. So I don't know if anybody else on the call ever experiences this, but if you ever get up at 6 a.m., 4 a.m. with those questions, those burning issues that you want to have resolved, I'd write those down on a piece of paper and I'd bring those to the meeting with Sasha, and invariably every time he'd help me solve those critical / pressing issues. So with that in mind, I'd love to encourage people to ask questions as we go through today's session. In the Zoom window, you can punch in your question whenever you want to, and we'll be sure to address those at the end. So Sasha is not only my personal mentor, advisor, and I like to call him my friend. He has also had an amazing career. He's been a studio head at Disney. Additionally, he was a president of Unbounce, which is a hyper-growth tech startup that has just had a ton of PR and a lot of success over the years. And he's just an all-around really good guy. So Sasha, welcome to today's conversation, sir.
Thank you, Jason. I absolutely call you my friend as well. And it's been amazing working with you and your team. And I'm really excited to be here today.
Awesome. And I'm just gonna tinker with my screens here for a second. I'm gonna pull up our questions. And I'll get things started with the first question. So as I mentioned, you've been a part of some really well-known culture first companies that have seen a lot of success. What role do you think culture plays in really, driving performance and overall organizational success?
It's funny. I'm a COO GM president, which basically means I have no actual skills. And really, if you kind of try and sum up what I've tried to do in my career, the environments or the companies I've tried to build is really build an environment where people can do their best work and have fun doing it. And I think that really, really speaks to culture. I think it's really difficult to do both. I think, or to have a great, successful company if you're not doing both. You have to build a company where people want to come to work. They have to feel like it's, a place where they can succeed regardless of their background, regardless of who they are. And you have to build a culture that is inclusive, that is diverse, that treats its people well, that builds a servant leadership first culture. And if you can do all that, you're going to drive really strong results and success. So I think it's very, very difficult to, the old adage of, do you want to be a leader or do you want to be a boss? I'm a big believer in servant leadership cultures where you want to be a leader, you want to help grow your company, grow your team, grow your people, and not just be there to tell people what to do and drive them to results. I think if you build a culture that works exceptionally well and people want to succeed, they want to do well for you, they want to do well for the company, then results follow, and they always follow.
Excellent. I'm going to ask a quick follow-up question on that. You mentioned the idea of servant leadership. I suspect a lot of people on the call are familiar with that term, but I'd love if you could maybe expand upon that a little bit more. And really specifically, I'd love to hear, is that something that you personally kind of have embraced and had success with?
Yeah, I mean, servant leadership for me means our job as company leaders is to, again, enable people to do excellent work and build the environment for them to succeed. You have to give clarity around strategy, help people understand the direction the company is going, help give people a roadmap in which to, drive against. But really it's about, liberating your team to contribute, to make decisions, to grow, to excel. I'm a very big believer in internal growth. I think as you grow, and by the way, I'm, a little bit of context for my background. Even though I've worked in corporations, I'm sort of 70-30 startup world, 30% corporate world. But even in my corporate jobs, I've been growing high growth teams and, pretty much always in the tech space. So really the hyper growth of individuals, the ability for them to reach their potential as quickly as possible and grow as fast as they can, has always been a key central part to any team that I've tried to build or run or inherit and try and improve. And really, if you're a good servant leader, you're unleashing that potential. Your job is not to tell people what to do. It's to build an environment and give them direction in which they know what to do and can do great work and own their own decisions and own their own success. And if you have barriers in between that, your job is to get rid of them, especially if you're one. A number of times I've started my own company, but I've also joined a few. And very often when I join companies, it's funny because I'm a COO, people immediately assume, oh God, no, a COO is coming in, is going to kind of put a lot of process in place and structure and lock down speed. And oh God, we're going to become a corporate, slow moving behemoth. And in reality, the first thing I usually do is come in, okay, where are they overprocessed? Where do they have things in place that are slowing them down? Where do they have too many checks? Where do you have executive reviews and you shouldn't have executive reviews, that sort of thing. And it's really about enabling speed at scale. Yes, you need some structure when you get bigger. Yes, you need people in roles you might not have when you're a 5-person startup as roles specialize. But it's really about removing overhead and increasing speed as you scale. And if you have a really great startup culture and you want to have a wonderful scale-up culture or corporate culture when you get bigger, it's really important that you do that you embrace it. Your culture is going to change, but that doesn't mean it needs to slow down. It doesn't mean it needs to become bureaucratic, and it doesn't mean that it has to be any less fun.
That's awesome.
That's great.
And
mind if I jump in, Jason?
Yeah, for sure.
Question. Yeah, Sasha, you keep flashing that Lucasfilms logo on your shirt.
Yeah,
I feel like there's a story in it, and I so badly want to ask, but we didn't prep you for it. So if there is one, feel free to share it. But I'm going to ask my question and give you some time to think about it. So a lot of the stuff you mentioned just now around enabling speed and enabling the individual to contribute as best they can, is definitely important. But I also know from the prep that we've done, creating the feeling of belonging to something is something that you hold really closely and you think is really important. Can you talk us through some of the things that you would do, maybe just as you get into an organization that help to build that feeling of belonging and holding things together?
Yeah, a couple of different answers to that question. There's, I'll start with one, which is organizational belonging, which is, and I'll come back to sort of individual belonging. One of the roles I played, which ties back to my shirt a little bit, is I joined the Walt Disney Company in Canada, actually, ironically, to run operations for their gaming studios up and down the West Coast. And originally, I was hired out of Vancouver and I was meant to move to California, but hired me quickly, didn't get my visa sorted out yet. So I spent a lot of time in our Canadian studio, which was in Kelowna, British Columbia, near Vancouver, and spent a lot of time with that team. And it was a very, very high performant startup called Club Penguin. It's a very big kids game at the time, probably 100 million players in the product. So, very, very popular. And then probably a lot of nodding people on the way. I was like, oh yeah, I got kids the right age. I know the game you're talking about. But it was a phenomenon for about 10 years. And it grew fast. It grew to, really a huge amount of revenue within the first 2 or 3 years of being founded, and was very quickly bought by Disney. And it was at the time sort of a 300-person team. And when I joined slightly after that to help that team and the other teams inside the organization work as effectively as they could and produce the highest quality product that they could. And obviously when you're ingesting, a startup into a large corporation, and I've been on both sides of this, I've sold startups to corporations. This is the first time that I joined a corporation specifically to oversee a startup inside that company. And it was a fascinating experience because the startup team, we're struggling a little bit with this, this relationship there. And the number of times I would hear, well, we want to try and do this, but Disney won't let us do that. We'd like to try this new thing. Oh, Disney won't let us do that. And then I would kind of dig in. It's like, why don't you think they would do it? It's like, well, it's a big corporation, and we're a startup, and we're still getting used to thinking like a corporation. And I said, well, give me an example. I said, oh, Disney wouldn't let us do that. And then I come back, it's like, well, Walt Disney's been dead since 1966. So like, who are we actually talking about here? Like, is there a particular executive who said you can't do it? Is it, against some rules that you've been told when you were purchased? And everyone would go, no, we just assume we can't. And then I would talk to like my boss, who is an executive in California, and he'd go, yeah, like, I don't know why they won't. Like it's, we bought this scrappy startup doing amazing things, transforming children's entertainment. We'd like them to keep doing that. Like we did, buy the organization for them to try and change to fit in with what we are. And the ironic thing was both cultures are so kid-centric. They're so leadership development centric. They're delightful cultures. They care about their team, and they're both destination type studios and products where people build up through a whole career to end up there. And it took a little while, but really it was about releasing the studio to basically return permission to them to go be a startup again and be a startup inside a corporation, which is what Disney wanted all along. And when we made some changes to that, and again, removed process and removed friction, they were doing amazing work. It was really just about keeping to their roots and keeping that feeling, to the point where the visit up to the Canadian studio was the most fun experience for all the US Disney executives. They couldn't wait to come up and visit because it was such a fun place to come and spend time with the team. And it was great to have a number of Disney executives feel like, the Club Penguin studio felt even more Disney than Central Disney did. So I think this is a big thing for a lot of startups that get acquired or kind of go through this transition to being part of a bigger corporation. There's a lot of belief that it's an exit or an end, whereas in reality, it's a bit of a change. But invariably, the company that wants to purchase you and work with you and partner with you is, wants what you are. They don't want you to turn you into something else. And I think that's very often forgotten. And a lot of failed acquisitions happen when you lose that, or you try and become something you're not, or you try and assume that you have to change Of course, it changes a little bit when you're part of a corporation, but that doesn't mean you need to lose your soul.
I'll just jump in
Anyway,
there, Sasha.
sorry, go ahead. Yep.
Because I've myself have just been through, well, in mining, as you know, there's tons of mergers and acquisitions, some being acquisitions, some being mergers. I find generally acquisitions, the integration is almost a little bit more seamless, just because, you know, one company comes in with their culture and that's the kind of culture management going forward. Whereas my most recent one, which was a merger, where you have two companies coming together, trying to kind of create a bit of a blended culture, that almost doesn't really seem to work as well. And so I'm just, you know, wondering how you've kind of, if you've found a difference between mergers and acquisitions, and kind of how that goes, how that process changes between one or the other.
Well, yeah, I would say that it becomes even more important in the sort of fundamental negotiation stage of that combination. And I think there are, you know, you can have different like team makeups, you can be in different geographies, you can be in different countries, and you can have different like cultures of people who are working together. And, you know, regardless of whether it's like a joining of equals or one's slightly bigger than the other, whatever, you can make that work really well, as long as you, in my opinion, if you fundamentally believe in working the same way. So for instance, if you're combining two companies, one is an incredible believer in building a servant leadership culture, and the other is highly directive, those sorts of integrations are very difficult. And I would say that includes if you're being acquired by a bigger company, not just with mergers. So you have to, I think at the very base level, when you're in those sorts of negotiations, you want to ensure as best as possible you're at least value aligned. You can go through a lot of, oh, we talk in this vocabulary and we use these acronyms and we kind of work this way, and, you know, we're waterfall and we're agile, and you can work through a lot of those problems if you're value aligned. But if you're not value aligned and you don't believe in the same sort of way of working or key forms of leadership, then that can be a big challenge. And when I have seen that be a challenge, invariably you have to get those two organizations on the same page. And often it means changing one or two senior leaders to the point where now the leadership team is aligned, they believe in the same growth culture, and now that can permeate through the organization. But I think sometimes the symptoms of that, like as I said, one company's agile, another's waterfall, and they're trying to figure out the best way of working. If you're struggling with a difficult integration, then those things feel huge. They feel super problematic and go, yeah, no, we're never going to get over this hurdle. But when you actually dig below the surface, it's usually, yeah, leadership. It's usually empowerment. It's the belief in what the core fundamental values are. And the symptoms are, oh, we work a different way, we're in a different time zone, you know, we're more sales, you're more marketing, we're more development, you're more, you know, overhead or whatever, as you're combining the organizations. But those sorts of things can usually be overcome if you're value aligned.
Excellent.
Absolutely.
Do you mind if I ask a follow-up on that? Sorry, I know you've got a good question.
No, go for it, please.
Sasha, values can be such a squishy thing. You know, you're going in and you're going through the process trying to figure out if your values aligned. What have you seen work? How do you figure that out before you get business married and then realize it's not going to work?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think there are a few things that are, and again, I think there's sort of a range here. So I'll give you one example where I've worked at a couple of different companies which have had transparency as a value, and that's pretty common in tech now. But it's also a very tricky value, because there's some companies out there who say, you know, transparency is a value, therefore we're going to publish everybody's salaries on the internet. It's like, okay, then transparency is absolutely a value. Like you're going to the nth degree with that sort of thing. Oh, there's like, okay, well, no, that's not what it means to us. What it means is, you know, whenever we have good or bad news at an executive level, we want to provide that to the company and be transparent about our challenges and things we need to change to be successful. And we're never going to hide the team from that. And that's a very different type of transparency. And then I've seen it in cultures, believe it or not, this exact thing has happened in a meeting where, you know, in a company that exposed transparency, somebody in the room said,
That's awesome, Sasha. And sidebar, I do find that so inspiring to hear that Disney is putting its values, kind of about profits in that example you just gave me, like, crafting a video game that doesn't necessarily put dollars first, but maybe the user experience at the heart of the kind of the whole game. That's cool. I just love hearing those stories. It fills me with hope for corporate America and Canada. I'm going to kind of switch gears and I'd like to talk a little bit about how to craft a good employee experience. So specifically, how is delivering an exceptional employee experience woven into the culture at Disney or any of the other organizations you've worked with?
Well, I think it manifests in a bunch of different ways. I think it's more important now than it's ever been before. It's been pretty interesting to go through this year where like the onboarding experience of employees is so critically important. In the last 6 months. And sorry, for context, while I've been, working with mostly through my career individual companies, president at Unbounce and, GM at Disney and whatnot. The last couple of years, as Jason touched on earlier, I've been working with a number of different companies as an advisor, helping startups become scale-ups. It's really, really what I focus on. And so this year, it's been pretty interesting for me because I've got to see a whole number of different companies transform into this, well, at the moment, remote first type of environment. They're just, everyone I work with have more or less shut their offices down and people are working in a distributed fashion. So even if they are coming back into the office, it's more the exception to the rule. So if you've built a really strong culture, that's working pretty well. Like you put some new processes in place to communicate effectively. A lot of new tools are being used to communicate with your teams. And those who I think were struggling with culture are having some challenges with that. People are missing certain events or things that they were doing together, and they're going, well, I feel like we're losing our culture. And I think while those things are important, the strongest cultures are infused in the way people work in their day-to-day work. It's not about parties and perks and events. Those things are great and they're great team building opportunities. But if you believe your teammates who are working with you are super communicative, have your back, helping you out, going the extra mile with communications when you're all distributed, then you really know that you've got that positive culture infused throughout the org. And that starts with onboarding. Like all of these companies are adding people, and building a delightful onboarding experience when potentially you've never met some of these people in person is super interesting, and it is become really important for every company I work with. Some of them have had really good mature onboarding processes, and they're really good at talking about what their culture is and very clear about what your job is, and really clear about what your first 90 days in the organization are going to be like. And then others maybe are a little smaller, but doing that just by personality and management, like individual one-on-one management. And if something got, okay, that's not good enough, like we need to make sure that we have a really good structure to bring people inside the company, because if we don't, and they're on day 3 and they're sitting there going, I don't know, and figure somebody should be telling me what to do today. Whereas you can wander over and say hi in an office. It's a lot harder to do that remotely. So yeah, the employee experience right now, I think that is most challenging for folks is on the onboarding side. But if you spend time making sure your onboarding process is delightful, educational, infused with the company culture, and really, really clear from a leadership point of view on expectation management, more than you might have ever done before, then it can be quite wonderful. And then by the time you actually get to meet your teammates in person, if you do end up going back to an office one day, it just makes it all that much better. You feel like you built a great camaraderie, and then that's just a big plus when you actually get to spend some more time together.
Great. And a quick follow-up. As you know, I love tactical takeaways, quick tips. That it's kind of hardwired into my brain. Can you share any stories or your favorite onboarding stories or experiences or tactics that you've seen play out in different companies?
Yeah, well, my favorite was probably at Unbounds. This is something we developed when I was there, but wasn't developed by me. It was part of the team that was helping with it. And actually, I'll take a very quick tangent on Unbounds, which is, a very, very employee-centric, live by your core values organization. And when I joined, it was very, founder-led, and it was a lot of teams go through this when they kind of get from the 50, 80, 100 stage, somewhere in there. It's really about developing your next layer of leadership. And the founders were doing a lot of this at that time. It was one of the reasons I joined the company, was to help with this. And the leaders that were emerging at the time were also trying to help with, it's like, okay, well, we think this is what our culture means to us. And, we'd love to infuse this in new people who start. And, the head of people and culture at the time, well, actually, she's still the head of people and culture there, Leslie Cullen. It's like, we need to make this onboarding process amazing, and we need to make it consistent. We need to make sure that, everybody gets access to everybody and gets to meet everybody. And, just really, really thoughtful about making sure that as the company grew, there wasn't sort of this disconnect between, founders or senior leaders and the team that join. Because when you're a 10 or 20 person startup, everybody knows everybody. You always have access to the CEO. But when you get bigger, you have to do that proactively. You have to make sure you care about that, and you have to make sure that it's codified in some way. And this was a huge part of that project, like getting access to leadership, being able to pick their brains, again, being very clear about roles, what everybody else did around the organization, understanding who you need to go to if you need support, but also making sure that we all played our roles. So I got to spend an hour in the first couple of days with every new report, every new employee that joined. And in some cases, we might have 20 or 30 people joining in a day, in a way that I got to talk about kind of what was important to me about the company. They got a chance to ask questions. And we had a very transparent culture. So they would ask me about numbers and growth rates and, churn numbers. And it was great. I love the fact that you could be, an hour into a relationship with an employee and already build such an excellent connection. And I think the transformation at the time the company went through to make sure that was infused in the culture started with onboarding. So that if you joined at employee 200 or 50 or 100 or 150 or 200, you all knew what mattered, and you all felt you were part of the same team. There wasn't the founder group or the first 10 employees, they're all in the special club, and us at employee 105 or cog in the wheel. And I think if you're not really, really proactive and conscious of that, it can be difficult to make sure that culture remains as you grow. So it starts with onboarding. I think that the team there did that about as well as I've ever seen. And it was also wonderful to see that leaders who were taking on new and bigger roles inside the company were driving that. And just a quick side note on them, I'll plug them a little bit here. Leslie and the team over there as well are driving, equal pay, diversity program challenge across the entire tech industry. So I will plug that. I think it's amazing what they're doing, and they're getting people to sign up to the Equal Pay Pledge. And I would encourage anybody on this call to look them up and see what they're doing and sign up.
That's awesome. Thanks so much for that summary, Sasha. And I think Reese had another question for us here. And you're just muted there, bud.
Sorry, guys. It fits in well with the responses to the polls from earlier, where career opportunity was one of the driving factors for people leaving. Disney is well known for its leadership development and training programs. Can you tell us a little bit about that, and specifically the leadership development side, but take it wherever you want?
Sure. I'm going to actually, again, answer that 2 times because I'm totally expected that would be the answer to the poll, but I'll come back to that. Disney was great. I mean, as I said, I'm a startup guy and I'm an entrepreneur, and I have worked in corporations mostly through acquisition or sort of just an opportunity that kind of came up out of left field. So I never really have pursued working for corporations because I've always been an entrepreneur. When I got the opportunity to join Disney, and I will admit my family are huge Disney fans, so if I'm going to go join a corporation, it was always they were always going to be on my list. But that's what Disney is about. They're a destination company. So there's certain companies you might join and work in throughout your career, and you're growing your craft, and then you go, but one day when I'm really good, I'm going to join. And Disney is one of those companies that when animators or filmmakers, creatives get to the top of their game, it's like, okay, I want to end up at Disney, or I want to end up at Pixar, or I want to end up at Lucas, or I want to end up at Marvel. So not only the corporation itself, but the brands inside the corporation are places where people want to end up. So the great thing about that is Disney knows that. Like, they know as a corporation, they have some of the greatest talent in the world. And as part of the executive team there, I was given the opportunity to have access to some absolutely incredible and amazing mentors. And they make leadership development a #1 top priority, whether it's emerging leaders or executives, but they also are very, very big on peer mentorship and leadership. And I think especially for senior leaders, it's less about, I need you as a leader to teach me a thing, and it's more about having sort of a peer mentorship relationship. Like for me, for instance, I was given a VP in the film department as my executive mentor because she was in the film department and she was on the creative side and I was on the technical side in the gaming department. And they felt that we were different enough that they wanted to infuse as much creative and storytelling and gaming as possible. And they wanted to infuse as much technology and technological problem solving into the film department as possible. They felt by pairing up people like us, not only could we help each other grow significantly, but we can help each other's departments be better by looking at things from a new point of view. And I've never experienced that anywhere else, any other corporation or company, where they so proactively try and match by business unit, by leader, by skill set, to try and challenge everyone to be better. And the great thing about Disney, again, it does have such a broad talent pool, from building robots in the Imagineering group to video games and films, and the tech team is strong, the creative team is strong, and obviously the business and licensing and finance teams are exceptionally strong as well. So across the entire gamut, the talent is enormous, and they know that, and they tap into it. And some of the training that they've done, just the workshop training, the sort of thing you guys do at Trailblaze Partners, absolutely embrace that. That's critically important to grow your leadership team. And I think there's nothing more important than bringing in folks, especially with an outside perspective, to help grow and challenge your team. And Disney were never afraid to do that either. They were always good at bringing in people who could really help us raise our game, and it really, really generated results.
Awesome. And sorry, Z, you're going to jump into the question in 1 second. And speaking of questions, we're going to open it up to audience Q&A in 1 moment. I would highly encourage you to start typing your questions into the question window. Sasha is an expert at, not to put you on the spot, but answering on the fly and providing insights and experiences. So please feel free to add your questions. I can already see one question in the panelist window, but please feel free to add them now. Z, over to you.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, and I think you touched on this a little bit earlier, but generally mining doesn't really lend well to, it's not an industry that sees a lot of crazy hyper growth in any particular given point in time, just because it requires a lot of a capital heavy process, obviously. Whereas obviously technology lends itself really well to these hyper growth kind of companies. And so I was just wondering if you could tell us a little bit about the story of Unbounce's hyper growth and how that kind of has worked with your leadership strategy.
Yeah, it's a good question. And I'll come back to the lack of growth point as well, because every company, even if they're in technology, like there's an assumption that all companies grow forever, and they don't. So you, especially startups and scale-ups, you get to the point where you end up as sort of a mature and stable company that does very well. And can do a lot of new and interesting things, but that doesn't mean you're doubling your headcount every year. And some of the very, very best tech companies in the world are pretty stable when it comes to growth. So I'll come back to that in a second, because I still think challenging and growing your people in an environment where your headcount is not growing is a different challenge. But yeah, with Unbounce, I'm mostly also a bootstrap guy, which is a little different than a lot of tech folks. So I believe very much in, where possible, to try and build business, strongly from the ground up. And that doesn't mean you don't bring in money, or you don't bring in, you don't take any debt. But I'm not like a traditional Valley VC type entrepreneur. So Unbounce is a very typical story, or companies that I really, really enjoy working with and for, because it was bootstrapped. It had a very, very small amount of investment initially, and it grew off being scrappy, caring about its customers, listening to its customers, building community, and trying to educate and change the market. And what was great about Unbounce is it helped create the segment it's in. It's a landing page conversion marketing platform. And when they started, that was not a thing. Like, it was just, a problem in marketing, that your spend that you were, your ad spend wasn't very effective, because you were just sending them to, unfocused locations like home pages on your website or whatnot. And Unbounce came along and said, no, we need to send your traffic to a landing page. We can really do a much better job of converting your traffic to actual customers. And that was what they were all about. But as part of that, they had to educate the market on why this was a problem. So they became thought leaders in that space. And so the entire culture was infused with education, listening to customers, educating the market. They created their own conference, which has become a world-leading marketing conference. And a huge amount of that has been giving back to the industry, and giving back to their community, and giving back to marketers. And, I know a lot of people talk about, customer first or employee first organizations. I've vacillated in my career what's more important. I think they're both equally important. You can't have one without the other, in my opinion. And for a company that cares and is infused with a passion to support their customers and their employees, it talks more about their leadership than it does whether they have to pick one or the other. Yeah, and then again, back to the point about, if you're not in a high growth company, how do you challenge folks? I think a company should always be trying to improve and do better, and be more efficient, be more profitable, go after new opportunities. And the best cultures in the world are ones that don't stagnate. That doesn't mean they have to generate, add a whole bunch of new headcount, but they should be looking always for new challenges, always trying to up their game from the senior leadership table down. And if you ever get into the position where you go, oh, well, we're not growing headcount, so I guess we don't need to get any better, then maybe you're working for the wrong company.
Excellent.
Absolutely. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I realized we're at around 40 minutes after the hour, and what I was going to do is going to jump in with a couple of audience Q&As, and then we can move to a wrap. I just want to be wary of time. So the first question, this came from Nicholas, thank you. And I've actually seen this one play out before, but his question is, or comment is, I believe I may have established the wrong values as a foundation of my culture. I grew up in a company where partying together was the essence of their success. I don't think that's sustainable anymore with this climate. Do you have advice on changing culture for the better, even though the current foundation is deep in the core of my employees?
That's a great question. So I've been in tech since '94, and early in our early culture things, we always had, pool tables and ping pong tables and foosball tables and parties, and it was also in England, so we all went to the pub every day, and it built this sort of, I don't know, frat culture is the right way to put it, bro culture. I think there's a little bit of that. It was not that bad, but it was certainly around the social aspect of the company. And the company did perform, like we did very well. We grew very fast. We were at a very exciting time in the 90s and in the web in England. But when you strip away that, social side of culture or the party side of culture, you have to ask yourself what's underneath. And you can sort of prop a culture up with that. And you can become a very, very approachable leader. And if you spent 4 hours at the pub with your CEO at the end of the night, just talking about the world, it can be actually quite a cool experience if you normally don't get access to that person. But when that goes away, you have to really ask yourself what's left. Like, again, have we built a culture of performance? Have we built a culture of support and camaraderie? Have we built a culture of diversity and inclusion? Have we built, and it's never too late to build those things. If you look and that part of your culture is gone, or at least gone temporarily, you have to ask yourself, well, what do we stand for now? Like, why would you work here? Why, do our employees, when they work in their day-to-day work, communicate effectively? Do they have each other's backs? Do we have a real team working attitude in this company? And do we have a culture of success? And by the way, I don't think there's anything wrong with having a culture of success and culture of performance and holding yourself accountable to goals, performance, and achieving things. So do those things resonate with your team or not? And if not, how do you make that happen? Because those are the things that will allow your company to scale, because a party culture of a company of 4,000 people also doesn't work. So that you'll have a natural point where that just will not scale either.
Or giant parties.
Yeah.
Or the parties get really expensive.
Yeah.
Awesome. And then just one other quick final question, then we'll wrap up here. So you mentioned earlier about hyper-grossing employees' growth. How do you make that happen?
Mm-hmm. Oh, this is not a 2-minute answer. This is one of the things I'm absolutely most passionate about. You should talk to Reese and Trailblaze and folks like him. By the way, number one, it starts with leadership development in my mind. There's nothing more important. I know it was tied for last in your slide, but it's still so important. If you're not getting good support from your leader, your direct leader, people leave, or people are not engaged. They're definitely not doing their best work. And investing in growing and not parachuting in, being there, done there leaders all the time, but really growing leaders who are infused with a servant leadership culture, are there to challenge and grow their teams, are there to support their teams, regardless of whether it's an employee-led growth culture or leadership-led growth culture, is the most important thing. If you're not making that investment, both in training, mentorship, finding peers in the community that your team can learn from, if you don't have anyone inside the company with that special skill, if you don't have a really, really, really clear development plan for your most senior leaders, then you're going to struggle to grow your whole team. So I think it absolutely critically starts there. And then building that out across your team, making sure people understand, this is critical, understand, if you know where your company is going, ask your individual employees this question. Okay, do you know where your company's going and why we're going there? It's like, often people go, yeah, no, I know we're going in that direction. I know why we want to head in that direction. Then you have to ask them, do you understand what how exactly your day-to-day work contributes to us getting to that goal? And more often than not, people go, I don't know. I think what I'm doing is important. I don't know. This is what I'm told to do. But if they can go, I'm doing this because I know it'll impact this, and I'm growing into this, so I can do this, and then I can impact this, and then I can help us get here. then you have the best companies pulling in one direction. And that just starts with communication. It starts with goal alignment, and having an actual development plan for your employees. I don't believe you're ever too small to be thinking about that next step of growth for every single person in your company. It takes time, but I think it's critical you make the time, even from a small startup.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. Well, we're about 45 minutes after the hour. Sasha, that was super educational and entertaining as always. I'm going to do a quick screen share and we'll go wrap it all up. So I wanted to say thank you so much to everybody for joining us today. And Sasha, thank you for dialing in from halfway around the world. You're south of the border right now, I believe. South of the equator, pardon me. So thanks for joining us.
Little north of the equator, but only a little.
Equator? Okay, very good. I just see I see the sun kind of bouncing over your shoulder there on as you bounce around on the boat. So as always, we've prepared an awesome takeaway for you guys. It's the 5 key takeaways on how to retain the right people. That'll be a summary being sent to everybody who joined today's call. We're going to email that through. We also often have a couple of special offers, and we're going to, if it's okay with you today, Reese, we're going to email those through to people in the follow-up email. So if they're interested in learning more about Trailblaze Partners or Bucket List Rewards, they'll just say yes. I'd like to learn more in the email. But I think with that, everybody, we could wrap up today's call. Any sort of final comments, Reese, Z, or Sasha from your sides? Awesome, guys. Well, thanks very much, everybody. Have an excellent Tuesday. And it was wonderful having you join us today, Sasha. Thank you again.
Thank you very much for having me, Jason. It was a lot of fun.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Cheers.